Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a mystery that honestly still kind of baffles the tech world. We're talking about Google's repeated, spectacular, and frankly insanely expensive failures at building a social network. We're going to crack open the data, read through the internal memos, and look at the structural decisions that led to what a lot of people consider the absolute biggest tech misstep of the 21st century. So let's just start with the ultimate mystery here. How exactly does a company with virtually unlimited money, a stable of the absolute best software engineers on the planet, and billions of daily users build a social network that literally nobody wants to use? I mean, this is Google we're talking about, a company that successfully organized the entire internet, mapped the globe, and built the world's most popular email client that had every conceivable advantage you could ask for. And that really highlights the paradox, right? On the one hand, you've got these world-changing, completely indispensable utilities: search, maps, YouTube, products that fundamentally shifted human behavior. But on the other hand, you have Google+, a product so universally rejected it essentially became a punchline, just a synonym for a failed social network. The stark contrast here isn't just about writing good versus bad code, it's about a fundamental, almost weird inability to understand basic social connection. Section 1. Google's early social failures. Now, to really wrap our heads around the Google Plus disaster, we actually need to rewind a bit, because there's this huge misconception out there that Google was just late to the social media party. They totally weren't. They actually tried to buy Friendster, which was one of the earliest social networks, for $30 million in Google stock just a year after it launched in 2003. When Friendster said no, a move that cost them over $1 billion in hindsight, by the way, Google just decided to build their own. And that resulted in a total graveyard of early attempts. Back in January 2004, weeks before Facebook even existed, they launched Orkut. It had a brief little moment, mostly in Brazil and India, but it just got hammered by massive security breaches and spam. Then we got Friend Connect in 2008, fizzled out. In 2009, they rolled out Google Wave, which was this incredibly confusing mashup of email, wikis, and multimedia that users just gave up on. And then 2010 brings us the absolute disaster of Google Buzz. They forcibly integrated it with Gmail, accidentally leaked people's frequent contacts to the public, and ended up with a massive class action lawsuit. So that's 4 separate social products, 4 completely distinct failures. Moving to Section 2, the Facebook panic. All this stumbling around led to an era inside Google that you can really only describe as the Facebook panic. By 2010, Facebook wasn't just a competitor anymore. It was an absolute existential threat. They were just gobbling up massive amounts of users' online time. And even worse for Google, Facebook was building a terrifyingly effective targeted advertising model based on users just voluntarily offering up their interests. Oh, and they were poaching some of Google's top engineering talent to build it. Just look at the sheer scale of the David and Goliath dynamic at play in 2010. Google was a complete behemoth with a market cap over $200 billion. Facebook, a private company valued at around $14 billion. But Google's VP of Social, Vit Gundrotra, saw Facebook's rapid growth and convinced CEO Larry Page that this was a red alert, all-hands-on-deck emergency. Google had the cash, they had the users, and they decided right then and there to deploy a Facebook killer. And this is where it gets wild, the way Google motivated its army. Larry Page sent out a company-wide memo tying a staggering 25% of all employees' annual bonuses directly to Google's success in social. Just think about how that kind of incentive structure changes a workplace. You suddenly had thousands of people, eventually over 1,000, working directly on the project, financially mandated to force human connection. It was literally brute corporate force applied to human networking. Which brings us to Section 3, launching a ghost town. So that super aggressive mandate first Google Plus in 2011. They pitched it as this massive, unified social layer for the entire web. But despite throwing endless resources at it, the launch strategy immediately sowed the seeds of its own destruction. See, Google decided to copy Facebook's early playbook by making Google Plus invite-only. Step 1, create exclusivity. If you got an invite, hey, you felt special. But then look at steps 2 and 3. Google waited way too long to open the doors. By the time the general public was finally allowed in, all that initial tech insider buzz had completely evaporated. The masses arrived, looked around, and realized absolutely none of their friends were actually there. And that brings us to the absolute golden rule of social media, the network effect. Think about the apps you use every single day. They only have value if your community is actively using them, right? Google Plus's long invite-only phase fundamentally broke this rule. It honestly didn't matter how pretty the interface was or how cool the video hangouts were.
If you logged on and none of your friends were posting, there was absolutely zero incentive for you to stick around and abandon Facebook.
And the data backs this up in just the most devastating way possible. Google loved to boast that they eventually had over 500 million users. But Comscore pulled the curtain back on those numbers. Check out these engagement estimates. Facebook users were spending an average of 7.5 hours per month on the site. Google Plus users, just 3 minutes per month. 3 minutes. Google themselves later admitted that 90% of user sessions lasted less than 5 seconds, and over 90% of profiles had literally never posted a single thing. It was a complete ghost town. So why were people bouncing so incredibly fast? Well, mostly because Google built features that felt like actual chores. The platform heavily promoted circles, which meant you had to manually categorize every single friend into specific groups, like family, coworkers, acquaintances. Then there was Sparks, which made you manually curate your interests. Basically, Google was treating everyday users like database managers. People don't want to organize their social lives with spreadsheets. They just want a simple, passive feed to scroll through while they're drinking their morning coffee. All right, Section 4. The forced integration backlash. Faced with these just totally abysmal engagement numbers, and remembering that 25% of their bonuses were on the line, Google's internal teams totally panicked. And their solution to the ghost town problem was aggressive forced integration. If people wouldn't visit Google Plus voluntarily, well, Google was going to make it mandatory. In this desperate bid to inflate user numbers, they started requiring YouTube users to create a Google Plus account, using their real legal names, just to like or comment on a video. Imagine being an anonymous YouTube user for years and suddenly being forced into a brand new separate social network you actively dislike just to participate in a community you already love. The backlash to this was instantaneous and visceral. The YouTube community completely revolted, spamming comment sections with ASCII art of a stick figure named Bob and a tank to protest the change. But what's truly incredible here is this quote. This wasn't just some angry teenager venting on a forum. This was the actual co-founder of YouTube. He updated the description of the very first YouTube video ever uploaded just to scream at Google's executives. Google was actively ruining its popular platforms just to prop up a failing one. Section 5. The final security breach. By 2014, the writing was pretty much on the wall. The narrative that Google Plus sucked was firmly cemented into the public consciousness. Vic Andrada, stressed out from all the internal rifts and sleepless nights, completely abandoned the company and his project. The platform was basically limping along as a zombie for a few more years until a fatal technical blow finally struck. 50 million. That is the massive number of users whose personal data was exposed due to a bug in the Google Plus API, which allowed third-party apps to access private data without permission. And making matters infinitely worse, Google was accused of trying to cover up the breach. When it finally came to light, it resulted in a massive class action lawsuit. So finally, in October 2018, Google formally announced they were pulling the plug. But, the postmortem from inside the company is honestly just as revealing as the very public failure. Former Google employee Morgan Knudsen tweeted this absolute scorcher after the shutdown announcement, and it just vividly illustrates the internal chaos. You had different teams working on Google Plus, completely isolated from each other. There was no unified grand vision, and employees were deeply, deeply resentful of being forced to work on a platform they already knew was broken from day one. Now, you would really think, this billion-dollar embarrassment would cure Google of its social media ambitions for good. But amazingly, in 2019, they tried again. They launched an app called Shoelace, which was designed to connect people for local city events. But it lacked any true innovation, and they happened to launch it right before a global pandemic, so Shoelace survived for less than a year before being quietly taken out back and shut down.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the ultimate lesson.
So as we wrap up this autopsy, we really have to look at the big picture here. Why does one of the most successful, innovative, and resource-rich companies in the history of human commerce repeatedly fail at the exact same task? It really all comes down to corporate DNA. Google's absolute brilliance lies in building utilities, search, maps, simple, ridiculously fast tools that solve complex logistical problems. But social DNA? That requires nurturing messy, unpredictable human communities. Google's internal culture is all about launching fast, and if a project isn't an immediate mega hit, they kill it and start over. That ruthless efficiency works wonders for tools, but it completely destroys the trust and the network effects you absolutely need to build a lasting community. The takeaway here for any business or community builder is that you just can't hit a reset button on human relationships.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. Can a company entirely built on cold, efficient algorithms
ever truly engineer warm, organic human connection. The story of Google Plus suggests that maybe, just maybe, some things can't be solved by throwing 1,000 software engineers and $1 billion at the problem. Thank you for hanging out with me on this explainer. I really hope this autopsy gave you a powerful new perspective on how even the absolute giants can fall when they forget exactly who they're building for.